nice to be here.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good. I'm very good. How are you? Is this Jessica speaking?
No, that's
Oh,
Elle.
it's Elle. Oh, hi. Hello, Elle. Hi. How are you doing? Where
I'm
are
doing okay,
you?
thank you.
Where are you based?
Morocco.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. Um, how?
I'm the talk about literature.
Sorry. Say that again. The line's
I'm the
not
one
great.
who always talks about literature.
Aha. Yes. Are you the one who is reading 2666?
Yes,
How are you finding it? Are you finished with it, or are you kind of in still in that
I
last part?
am actually. I finished it like 3 days ago. I finished it.
Yeah.
What a
How
blast!
how did you find it? It's an amazing book, isn't it?
Well, it feels a bit weird to say. Yeah, it is. It feels a bit weird to say I enjoyed it, considering part four. But yeah, it was pretty illuminating, I'd say. Very concise, very uh, interesting when it comes to criticizing critics. I liked that part a lot.
Are you talking about the first bit?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes, I am.
yeah, I really like that. I like the whole book. It's definitely a book that I think has stayed with me over the years,
Which was your favorite?
which was my favourite bit.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if I did find the part about the crimes quite punishing. I guess that's the point. Um, but
I
I
bet,
think about
yeah.
every bit of it quite often. I have to say, I really like the. Is it the second or the third bit that's the one about the boxing match? The part about fate.
How you mean the third one? Yeah, the part about the third one.
Yeah, I really I love that. I mean, yeah, I remember the whole thing surprisingly well, given that it was a while ago that I read it and it's so long. I love the final bit as well. I think that uh, yeah, probably that very final bit is the other one that I remember enjoying particularly much. Have you read The Woes of the True Policeman?
That's no.
It's a really interesting kind of companion book to 2666 because from what I remember of it, one or two, it's also divided into five bits. It's quite short. It's only maybe
Mm-hmm.
about 200 pages, and I think that yeah, one of the parts is either taken from 2066 or it's like an alternate draft of it. And then the other bits are not about the same characters per se, but it's almost like a kind of remix of 2666. And I think in some ways I almost preferred it. There's something more satisfying about it as a reading experience, I suppose, just kind of in and of itself. But again, I mean, it's a totally different beast.
I
It's
will. I will definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's really good. There also,
Mm,
I mean, just
very interesting.
as it happens, it also has maybe one of my favorite ever reviews of it. I remember Blake Butler did a review of it at the time, and that weirdly is a review that's really stayed with me. I'm not necessarily someone who has kind of favorite book reviews, but I remember that one being a really good one. Uh, he says some really interesting things about literature in there that I often think about, and I feel that they either kind of resonated with things that I think about books myself, or at the time I thought, oh yeah, that's kind of given me a really interesting way of thinking about things that I kind of took on and took forward with me. Um, yeah, it's a good review. I
Can
think it
you
was in Vice or
can you
something.
share it with me later, please?
Yeah, you know what? While we're talking, I'll see if I can
Oh,
find I'll see if I can find the link. I'm fairly sure you may have to, or someone may have to, like, say something or talk, so we're not just totally silent. I'm not very good at multitasking. Who else? Who else is joining us?
You know, the third part,
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
about faith, incidentally, that was my least favorite part.
Oh, okay. What was it about it that you weren't?
Yeah,
What didn't appeal to you about it?
well, I guess it was the character himself, I guess, who was really tedious.
Mm,
It was
yeah,
a chore to actually have to go through his thoughts, but
yeah,
I understand why it is so. It might be one's favorite because there was a lot of revelation in that part.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Things started to make sense. So yeah, and also what you said about the book staying with you for a while, I think that would happen to me as well. It is pretty memorizable.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I got you. I found that review, by the way. Let me just put it in the chat.
Thank you.
It's quite. Um, it begins. I absolutely hated Roberto Bolaño the first time I read him. I'd heard the endless hype surrounding the release of translation after translation, a kind of post-death onslaught in the manner of some literary
Hmm.
two-pack who kept pumping books out after, and they kind of cut off there. Actually, I'm not sure why, but the bit that I particularly remember
Hmm.
liking, I'm going to read out now actually, just because why not? Um, After finishing 2666 and accepting that there was
Sure. Yeah.
something. Oh no, I'm just reading out the. Sorry, to avoid confusion, I'm just reading out one paragraph of this review. Um, After finishing
All right.
2666 and accepting that there was something to the shape, I began to read his other works. I read By Night in Chile, Antwerp, Nazi Literature in the Americas, between parentheses, The Secret of Evil, and Distant Star. I liked most of them pretty well. Finally, I decided to give The Savage Detectives a second shot. I was still put off by its exaggerated sense of self-romance, but I understand it differently now, coloured by the context of Bolaño's massive textual body, his elocution, and his continual sense of shaping space, creating body and contour out of air. Bolaño's great love for literature, the tradition and body of it more than the language, and the arc of a person and their work, now seemed of greater importance to me than a lot of what we think about as an author's idea of their career. In America, much to our detraction, our literature supports less the body of one's creation and more who the writer is and what they've done. Bolaño seemed to be more concerned with melding the otherworldly and the real, constructing sentences that mean to span the space of life and death at once, instead of simply trying to explain or outline the everyday. Even in his most bloated moments, Bolaño seemed to come from an understanding that people are portholes, that a creation can represent singular space that otherwise would go unknown, that what survives of someone is often beyond them, beyond control, though also a thing that could be aimed at and desired, built. This to me seemed more refreshing than the aspirations of many of our current American literary figureheads. It's particularly that last couple of bits actually that really kind of stayed with me. The thing about people being portholes was
Hmm.
something I spent quite a lot of time thinking about. I guess I came to my own kind of
Yes.
private interpretation of what he means there. But then also that other stuff about a creation representing singular space that otherwise would go unknown, that what survives of someone is often beyond them, beyond control, but also a thing that can be aimed at and desired and built. I don't know. What do you think about that? Does that kind of resonate with what you feel that you were
It
kind of
does. It does
experiencing? And
actually. It does because yes, part of what has been mentioned is that well, indirectly, is that Blano creates an important degree of uncertainty. Like you are not going to get a lot of answers, but he just keeps you caught. He keeps you wanting to know more, and if you are not going to be um necessarily satisfied by the end of the novel,
yeah,
but he
yeah,
does. pose really important questions, and he does focus on marginalized issues too.
Yeah,
Uh, he's very daring and provocative. I loved it. I loved it.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I've just remembered the way that it ends, or at least the way that I kind of what I recall of the ending. Isn't it something to do with Neapolitan ice cream? Something to do with I remember it ending in a really
Yes,
it ends in a really kind
yes.
of unexpected,
Hmm.
almost sort of silly way. But I remember feeling, and I really can't remember why I felt this, but I remember thinking that it was a perfect ending. That there was no way that he could have brought everything to a close in actually a more appropriate way than whatever it is that he does. I'd have to revisit it actually to to try and remember.
That's actually true. Yeah, he died before finishing it, but even if he stayed alive, I don't think that he would have changed much.
Yeah, yeah. I remember being quite surprised actually when I was speaking about a friend with it who speaking about it with a friend rather who was a big fan of the Savage Detectives, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, you can really tell from 2666 it's nowhere near finished." And I was just thinking like I don't get that. It feels for for what it is,
Hmm.
it feels very complete. I mean, I guess different writers have different ways of leaving things incomplete and yet not feeling incomplete. I mean, thinking of Kafka, for example, that there's a certain sort of
Yeah.
I guess there's a certain way that they educate Kafka's novels, but also 2666. They kind of subtly educate you as a reader in terms of how to how to engage with their incompleteness such that it doesn't feel incomplete. I feel anyway. I mean, not necessarily in the sense that they go out of their way to kind of yeah tell you how to read them, but at the same time, there's something in it, isn't there? Like I think particularly about the castle. I mean, the castle to me is I guess
Oh, yeah.
the one
Yeah,
that feels
that's
the
true.
most incomplete in a specific sort of way, I suppose, of Kafka's novels. But it feels like there's a lot of work for you to do with it. You get it almost from the beginning that there's this sense that the game is handed over to you as a reader to sort of do what you want with
Hmm.
it, and you don't necessarily feel. I'm not a big fan of the Metamorphosis, for example, of by Kafka, because I guess not because it's a sort of completed story, but I feel that you can very much tell when you're reading it that this has been very much worked over for publication. It's a good piece of storytelling. And I'm not sure when it comes to Kafka anyway, I'm not sure I like feeling in the hands of Kafka the storyteller. I kind of like feeling myself to be in the hands of Kafka who's struggling, really struggling to sort of complete an intractable task.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
obviously
right.
there are various sort of layers of
It's
that sort
part
of
of the
intractability.
identity.
Right, exactly, that's right. But I mean, even if you didn't know anything about Kafka's life, I think you can tell how much how much of an incredible struggle the castle must have been for him to write, and how weird a novel it is,
Hmm.
just in terms of the kind of patterning that goes on through it. Um, it's such a disorienting novel to read compared to his other novels, and I feel that a lot of that comes from this
It is.
sense of incompleteness that's kind of baked into it. And in the same way, I feel like 2666 has its own form of like complete incompleteness or the incomplete completeness. I don't know what you would call it exactly, which I think is again it's
I
his own
like
type of
that.
thing. But you know what I mean? It has got that sort of character to it that I think
Yes.
is definitely a huge part of its appeal. I actually have to say I never actually finished the Savage Detectives because I don't know, maybe it just didn't appeal to me at the time, but it also had a sort of very different kind of vibe to it in terms of yeah, kind of how I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about things that I haven't read for a long time, so I think I'll stop there. I'm probably not going to say anything particularly
I have to pick
worthwhile
it
about the
up.
Savage Detectives.
Oh, I don't think so. But yeah, at some point in 2666, it was mentioned that people prefer to read complete works because that gives them a sense um, uh, of certainty, something like this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it puts their lives into order. But
Mm.
it is the secondary works and the ones that are incomplete that are the more through
Oh
uh,
yeah. There's
to
that bit.
the author and also to life in general.
Right. There's that bit about the forests of books, aren't there? Is that am I remembering that correctly? Where he's talking about the I think he talks about Kafka, doesn't he? Doesn't he talk about the metamorphosis being I can't remember this, but
Yes,
it's this
yes,
thing about the forest of
yes.
literature that I
And the
think it's
second part, the one about
right, right. Yes, yes. I remember that being a really great bit.
the one about Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
Amalfitano, yeah.
it was.
I think it's Amalfitano who's the main character in The Woes of the True Policeman, if I remember correctly.
In part two, he was the main character.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Amazing book. I've been wanting to go back and listen to it, read it again for a long time. I'm wondering if it's nearing that time that maybe I'll do it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think so. If you skip part four, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Not sure quite how much of an appetite I have for that. Yeah, for going back to part four. Um, I see we've got some other people who've joined us. We've got please forgive me in advance if I mispronounce names. I'm not very good at pronouncing names the right way the first time round. But we've got Pratik, we've got Lucas, who I think or I know is in Mexico City. We've got Jay, we've got Iman, we've got someone whose name I will pronounce as A. There are some emojis after that. If you want me to call you something else, then do let me know. And we've got Jessica as well. Hello to you all. Very glad to have you here.
Hello, thank you.
Um, yeah, if anyone wants to, I'd be keen to hear from you, kind of where you're where you're joining us from and what's going on. What's going on today? Is it morning? Is it midday? What's going on with you?
It's morning here. I'm in Honolulu.
Oh wow.
I'm not really doing anything. I'm about to. As soon as this chat's done, I'm going to take the garbage out. That's about all I've got going on.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, Lucas has just said, sorry, I can't answer now. No worries. Don't worry. Just yeah. I don't know if you saw my message before actually, but you can also just uh, message us in the voice chat if you've got any contributions or questions or whatever, and I'll read them out. Um, so yeah, feel free to do that. How about you, Pratik? Where are you? Are you able to speak or
Hey, yeah, I am. I'm in Bombay.
Bombay?
I'm an artist. I'm based out of here. I just moved here recently, actually, about a year ago.
Uh-huh. Where did you live before?
Yeah. I was in Boston for a couple of years, New York for a couple of years, and then Bombay now.
Great, great. What's your artistic practice?
So I have a background in tech. I went to MIT and then I started a studio in New York. So my work is a lot of, I don't know, critiquing complex systems, really.
Hmm.
Yeah.
In what I mean, when you say that, I can imagine all sorts of different forms that could take within a kind of artistic practice. What kind of what kind of area of it do you focus on?
So a couple of projects I'm doing right now are one of them is about tech, surveillance capitalism, and the nature of labor within that. So it's basically a loom that I'm building, and along with that, I'm building an entire Jacquard system. But what I'm doing is I'm separating the weaver from the loom and reversing causality within that. So typically, it's these systems that have like the loom. Loom is an interesting machine because it's like the mother of everything. It's like
Yeah.
the industrial revolution happened there. Computers came from there, It's got a lot of those threads going in there.
Yeah.
So I'm a digital nomad. I don't use social media. I don't use any of the big Facebook, Amazon, Googles. So I feel like if these systems already have a consciousness, then maybe I exist in the dreamscape. And so perhaps this room that I'm trying to build with this deconstructed loom spread out all over the room is the Oedipal fantasy. So that's what I'm going for.
That sounds really interesting. Do you have a
Thank you.
website or anywhere we could take a look at your work? I mean, if you want, just email it to me or DM me or something like that. I'd be really interested to see what you do.
Sure, yeah, I'll do that. I haven't updated my website in a long time, but I can send you something.
Yeah. I mean, we'll drop it in the chat in the Impossible Objects Telegram chat as well, if you want to.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
And you're based out of London, is it?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's the end of the day. It's been quite a kind of hectic day for me, I suppose. But this is a nice way to end the day. I've got something kind of. I mean, I didn't really know what sort of form this call was going to take. To be honest, I didn't know who was going to be able to
Mm-hmm.
turn up. And I thought I would let it take its own form, really, which I'm glad it has already so far. It's been nice. It's been really nice chatting about some literature. Weirdly, given
Yes.
that I'm that I've started this press. I have to say that in the last 6 months, I've spent less time actually being able to just chat about literature or even really read that much than possibly any other time in my life for one reason or another. I mean, it's got a lot to do with having a 3-year-old and a newborn baby, and kind of fitting in other things around that. But then also, I suppose, trying to
Oh,
just
yeah.
prioritize, kind of trying to prioritize actually, getting conversations on AI going and trying to work on our other publication as well. So it's kind of tended to leave the actual reading sometimes has to take a bit of a backseat. So yeah, it's nice to talk about literature. Very nice, in fact. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
We'll spam you with it now and then.
Say that again. Sorry, I didn't hear. There was a train going past the window. Can you say that again?
I said I said I will spam you with it now and then.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Feel free. Feel free. But yeah, I mean, just in a kind of broad sense, when I suggested these community calls, I suppose that I kind of thought that it'd be really, a nice, first of all, just a nice way to connect. In that we chat uh, in the in the group just with text messages, but it'd be quite nice to actually have conversations as well.
Yeah.
Kind of live conversation. So there was that just as a sort of basic thing. It would be quite nice to just hang out. But then also, as I think I mentioned back at that particular time, um, I mean, one of the reasons that I mean before I had the idea of setting out Impossible Object in the form that it is, I wanted really just to my original plan when I started thinking about this last year was really just to start I guess, well, a small press that didn't particularly have any sense of interacting with crypto or Web3 or any of that kind of stuff. I was just going to do a fairly straightforward kind of press. And one of the things that drew me to wanting to have Impossible Object as a kind of crypto or Web3 press was the thought of where that could go and what kind of form that could take, which, as I think I mentioned, I'm really just working this out as I go. I didn't have a big blueprint at the beginning. I just had a bit of an intuition or a sense that this could be something that could be a worthwhile experiment with publishing literature and publishing this particular type of literature as well. And that, I suppose, was the other thing that I would be, keen to hear your thoughts on or talk about if you've got any thoughts on them, on this topic rather, as we go, in this call and other calls, to try and work out what this is, work out what Impossible Object is, work out what a Web3 press is. I mean, I don't know of any other presses doing something, like this, but I can imagine that this may possibly become something that's more widespread, or at least aspects of it, in the future. And yeah, it'd be interesting to think about potential forms that publishing via Web3, I say Web3 and crypto, they're not the same thing. Obviously, Web3 is a kind of, I guess, the next generation of the web, but obviously crypto is going to be a central part of it. Maybe I should just talk about Web3 rather than crypto specifically, because it's a more broad term. But
Well,
yeah, so I kind of
You
lost my
know,
thread there. I lost my thread slightly, so I'm
fir-
glad that someone's
fir-
dived in.
yeah.
You probably got a
First of
sense of where I
all,
was going. Hello, A.
yeah. Hello. First of all, hi. And
Hi.
second of all, what I find actually most interesting in all of this is what I perceive to be a much lower community interaction latency than one would typically see in any traditional publishing space.
Right. You mean in the sense that it's kind of quicker and easier to have that kind of community interaction from the off, rather than it being something that's
Yes,
kind of,
exactly.
yeah, got it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that arrives much later, exactly.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, that really appeals to me as well.
And you already have, like, normally or typically, I would at least speculate, you would have already in place at that point community managers, social media managers, PR managers, and so on.
Yeah,
You know?
right. Yeah, precisely. I mean, yeah, I don't know how much all of you. I mean, I'm presuming that some of you are kind of, have already have familiarity with, I guess, things like Discord and obviously Telegram, which I suppose, I mean, this is something that I think is very. What I was about to say, but I was about to get kind of sidetracked again. But just the simple point I was about to say is that the reason that I set up this Telegram group was because I could see how it's just absolutely the norm within crypto in particular to have either a Telegram group or a Discord, or potentially both, but one or the other, pretty much from the very beginning. It's not like a protocol is completely built and then the Discord comes after that. Discord, for those of you who don't know, is a kind of public server platform that was originally used for gaming, but now is kind of like the default. It's like public forums, I suppose, for crypto protocols. But yeah, that seems to be something that kind of just starts happening near the very beginning of projects, rather than when they're just like this completed project that's just thrown in there. I mean, certainly with there are a couple of especially DeFi, as in decentralized finance projects, that I kind of follow, where you can see that it's a fascinating sort of interaction that you get between the community and the protocol, where the community is constantly suggesting things and then developers are taking them on and potentially acting on them. There are lots of votes, kind of community votes on the direction that the protocol could take. And I guess that was one thing that I saw as being the potential for that within running a small press. I mean, as strange as it might seem to take that idea from decentralized finance over to this, yeah, it seemed that there was a lot of potential for that, which was part of the idea behind doing the crowdfund for conversations on AI on Mirror and issuing the Impossible token. I don't know how many of you are Impossible token holders, but yeah, that has the potential to be used as a governance token and to to make certain things possible, with how the direction that this press takes. If I'm using any terms, by the way, that are unfamiliar to you, please do jump in and ask me what they are. I kind of sometimes forget how far into the dark forest I ventured. I'm probably not saying anything particularly kind of
I actually have a
weird,
stupid
but
question.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right, what is this Web3? Oh,
Yeah, I mean that's a great question because I haven't really ever taken the time to sort of talk about it in in the actual chat. I mean, I'm not sure that I necessarily know myself, to be honest. I suppose that if I have a think about where I formed this concept, it's a shorthand that people seem to use for, or that people use for periodizing the different stages of the web. So you have kind of Web 1, which is, I guess, pre-Facebook, essentially. So that's, the web from its inception up to social media, more or less. Which I guess is, I mean, someone else might be able to jump in and give a sort of better, characterization of this than I'm about to give. But when I think about Web 1, I often think about what Edward Snowden, his description of the kind of early days of the web, when the kind of sense of freedom that he said he experienced in chat rooms where there was a sense of excitement, a kind of sharing information about possibilities, where the web could go. This kind of, I suppose, this sort of sense of optimism about what was going on at that time, and building the web, and build it, the sort of future they envisaged, which I guess sort of gradually kind of soured with the dot-com bubble. And then I guess people, again, I'm maybe surmising here, but I guess people felt a kind of resurgence of that optimism when so-called Web 2 came along, i.e. Facebook, social media in general. So I guess that was around, 2006, where the idea was that, yeah, I don't know, how does one summarize what exactly happened there? Hard to say, but I guess one thing we can probably all agree on is that there was clearly like a paradigm shift, a major paradigm shift there, where everything that we've now come to know as social media kind of came into existence over the say 4 or 5 years after that, and has had its own arc, just like Web 1, of initial optimism. So Lucas has just sent a very useful graphic here. Let me just see if I can expand this. This is, as I think I mentioned, by the way, this is being recorded, so you can all watch this back afterwards if you want. So Web 1.0, green shoots of e-commerce, desktop browser access, dedicated infrastructure. Web 2.0, social networks, mobile first, always on, cloud-driven computing. There's also this useful graph underneath of I guess some of the kind of biggest companies or biggest names kind of associated with these eras. Web 2.0, we've got Facebook, Airbnb, and Uber. I guess all companies that we think of as being somewhat villainous, probably with good reason. Although I guess that wasn't necessarily how they were viewed at the very outset. And then Web 3.0, AI-driven services, decentralized data architecture, and edge computing infrastructure. And then underneath that, we've got Bitcoin, Ethereum, Maker. So I guess the sort of crypto aspect of it is particularly captured by that idea of decentralized data architecture. But yeah, I mean, what I understand as Web 3.0, I guess, is very informed by my awareness of crypto, which is not something I've been involved with for a terribly long time. But I guess, just to give a simple example, of maybe the difference between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0, I could give the example of music streaming, how artists get compensated for their work. Web 2.0 is Spotify, right? Where even an artist who has millions of streams a year will get paid an absolute pittance, because the streaming companies have the ability to do that. Whereas at least one model, one option which is offered by Web 3.0 is the idea of tokenizing tracks with NFTs, so that an artist can sell the NFT to of one of their tracks, potentially for actually quite a large amount of money, and that track can be free to all, pretty much as it is on a streaming service or via YouTube, but the artist can be compensated for it up front, as it were. And then if that NFT ever changes hands, they also get royalties, which are kind of baked into the smart contract that is governed, that that is that NFT essentially as part of it. I feel like I've rambled on somewhat, but does that sort of answer your question? At least does that sort of begin answering your question?
Yes, yes, it does. Thank you.
Lucas has just put a quote in the chat here, which I'm trying to kind of read ahead of time before I read it out. But I'll just read it out, and then I'll understand it at the same moment as you guys. With Web 3.0, women, men, machines, and businesses will be able to trade value, information, and work with global counterparties they don't know or yet explicitly trust without an intermediary. The most important evolution enabled by Web 3.0 is the minimization of the trust required for coordination on a global scale. This marks a move towards trusting all constituents of a network implicitly, rather than needing to trust each individual explicitly and/or seeking to achieve trust extrinsically. Yeah, I mean, definitely that kind of emphasis on. If I'd have to quickly reread that. So the minimization of the trust required. Hi, who's that?
Yes, it's Lucas.
Oh, hey, Lucas.
Hi, Ross. So I can. May I? Hi. I
Yeah,
would
go
just
for
like
it.
to,
Go
to
for
add
it. Do you
something
want to?
in regards to this.
Yeah, go for it.
Yes, I think everything you said is basically correct. What I think is most exciting about this is the question it brings out of people that are new to this, right? Something I find exciting about telling people about NFTs, and something that's happened is that I feel like the leader of a cult because I want to bring everyone into this world.
Yeah.
I coordinate an art community. You can check it out in Twitter. It's called. I'll write it down because it's like a Mexican name. I really cannot say it in English. Tianguis.
Oh yeah,
But it's
you've mentioned
basically
this before, haven't you? I remember
yes,
last week
I
or
have,
something.
and I'm
Yeah.
I'm not here just to shill it out, but I
No,
just want to mention
Feel
it,
free
right?
to drop it in there. Drop the Twitter in the chat when you got a moment.
Great, thank you, Ross. I will. And yes, and it's been moving fast. It's very amazing that we began on May with artists that were selling their NFT art very low because they were just beginning. And now the biggest house of auctions, of art auctions in Mexico, already contact them and they're having their first auction today. So it's moving fast, right? But something we wouldn't like to for it to happen is that the big companies, the big names appropriate the means and then just use it for their own well-being, right? What I
Yeah.
see that is happening, what is exciting, is that it's challenging notions of copyright. I've had a lot of discussions, sad to say, with philosopher friends that question the possibilities of this Web3, of crypto, of blockchain through the lenses of our actual world. And by that, they mean like, oh, this is wrong and bad, not working because it's not, because the law, because it's not legally coded. And I just
Yeah.
always answer them, what makes you think that being legally coded makes it good? What part of the law makes you think that something is good because it's legal? That for me, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm not a libertarian or anti-government, well, in some regards, but I don't believe that how do you call it, regularization? No, when the government comes in and regulates, government regulation, right?
Regulation.
Exactly. Sometimes we think, and those of us who are more leftist, we think that it's an inherently good thing that the government regulates stuff. But what we've seen since the 2008 crisis is that that's not necessarily true. Every time there's a financial crisis and the government regulates, the only thing they actually do is lower risk for the big companies, while the common people, common folk, workers, anyone, they really don't see the benefits of regulation. It's just a benefit for the big companies, so this doesn't happen again as bad, for example.
Yeah.
So I think what's so great about this new world is that it's being built and it's challenging the notion. There's no right answer to the question: how does this work with copyright? How does this work with property?
Yeah.
How all of those questions are being challenged. What you mentioned before about NFTs, it's what I love the most. Is that for example, the essay we published, anyone can read it, and we know that.
Yes.
But if someone wants to buy it, they can do it, and that's great because it's not like some people have told me, well, why
Yeah.
don't you just set up a Patreon and people can donate there? And it's not the same because what happens with things like Netflix, for example, that has a lot of movies, is that I think it devaluates movies because they give you a bunch of them, like in the undifferentiated, a bunch for a very low price. This way, you can actually pay for something that can have more value later, and give you an extra. And I don't think that's necessarily bad or capitalist or anything, but
Yeah.
it challenges the notion of property that we have worked with. That's what I find philosophically interested, and also I'm critic about it because it's not all wine and roses, right? It can turn
Yeah. Yeah.
really bad,
Of course. Of course.
but that's not an
Which I
excuse
have no
not to
doubt it.
engage with it.
Yeah. Which I have no
Mhm.
doubt it will, in the sense that I mean, not being pessimistic about it, but Web3 will obviously have its own arc of optimism followed by disappointment and backlash, and then Web4 comes along. I mean, I don't know if you follow what's his name, Jacob Horn from Zora, who's was tweeting
Uh-huh.
last week, I think, about kind of what's Web4, what's Web5, what's Web6. Always, a useful reminder that this is the era we're entering, but obviously it's going to turn sour at some point, and there will be another one that we kind of feel optimism about. And yeah, I'm not trying to be cynical, but I can
Oh, no,
get a sense that
I
I mean
understand. I
obviously
think
I
I
share in the
was.
optimism of
Uh-huh.
it, but still I'm just saying obviously I feel optimistic about it, but at the same time, yeah, I guess you can already see some of the seeds of where it might kind of go a bit sour.
But the thing is, for example, that I agree. I mean, it might, but it also, I mean, instead of looking like a big picture of up and downs, maybe what I find interesting is the idea, for example, that communities could create their own money now that they have the medium to do so, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, that didn't happen with Web 3. I'm sorry, with Web 2. I mean, it
right,
was
right,
just big companies appropriating means of information, coordinating them. I mean, we can all agree Uber, it's a great thing in the idea, right? It's a corporate implementation
mm, in
that's
theory, yeah,
horrible for workers,
right,
but
yeah,
in the idea, it's great. Maybe this could create new communities that have their own money to maybe to trade specific things.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm a very some of the politics I've been following recently in philosophy, political philosophy, is the idea of localism of
mm,
communities, like it's basically like a strand of anarchism, like
okay,
communities self working for each other with specific goals in mind, stuff like that. And I
yeah,
think these technologies offer the tools for that to make it easier if you really dig into them. Right at the beginning, it's incredibly difficult, but once you begin to understand them, I think they offer those possibilities of yes. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. No, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously this is a huge topic. There's so much to say about it, and we'll probably return to this theme so much. But yeah, I think that I mean something I was just going to mention then actually was that I don't know whether there are actually plans afoot to do this, but I'm sure that it will happen at some point. But the point has been made that Uber could be quite straightforwardly replaced with a set of smart contracts, which would allow such a platform to operate in a completely decentralized way, and obviously allow individual drivers to really work for themselves. Um, I mean, this is not something I've thought a tremendous amount about. So I mean, it's possible that someone could point out some serious flaws with that model. But I think the very fact that it could do without a a leadership of the sort that has made Uber into exactly what we know it to be today, I feel like that can't be a bad thing in potential at the very least. another project that just, I mean, I know we're kind of veering away slightly from talking about literature here, but maybe we need to talk about Web3 first before we can think about what the place of a small press is or of kind of literature is within Web3. But I don't know if any of you are aware of this, I think, quite fascinating project. I really should know, I should have done my research maybe a bit more carefully about this before talking about it. But I wonder if you've heard of Klima. It's a coin that I don't think is actually launched yet. So it's KLIMA. Let me put you know what? I'm going to put the link to their Medium page in so you can read about it for yourselves. And maybe I can read about it a little bit more when I've got a moment. But as I understand it, the idea behind Klima, they're going to release a coin quite soon, and the objective is to build up a sufficiently large treasury to buy up all of the carbon credits currently available, so that they can't be hoovered up by major polluters like China, Russia in particular, and hopefully to, in that sense, pursue a really meaningful sort of financial activism, which I'm not really sure could be possible in any other way. I mean, there are so many things to say about it, but one of the things that actually seems to be quite successful, I went to an Extinction Rebellion action the other day. In fact, that's where the new profile picture comes from. That's on the Impossible Object group and also on the Twitter, the skeleton with the impossible object in its hands. So I went to an Extinction Rebellion action, and it was the first time I've been to one in quite a while because of the pandemic, because of having young children. And I'd forgotten about the mix of fear and optimism that one experiences at such events, particularly of fear, actually. I felt that there was a stronger element of fear to it there than previously. And was thinking about how tricky a motivator fear is, especially for something like climate collapse. And then I think about something like Klima, which again, this is not something I've thought deeply about. This is really just something I'm kind of being told about, and I'm kind of passing on to you pretty much as I've been told about it. But it's something that makes use of self-interest, actually, in the sense that people who hold Klima coins potentially stand to do quite well out of it. And the protocol will also amass a treasury which can accomplish this, or has the potential to accomplish this aim, which I think is very worthwhile. And not something I think would really be possible without this form of decentralization that Web3 makes possible. Just looking at these messages that have just been dropped in here. So L says, so is it about opening possibilities by making things free and whose value could increase after they're consumed? Yeah, I think it is partly about that. Yeah, it's interesting that you kind of zone in on those two things in particular. Does it make things free? In a sense, yes. In the sense that I guess that's at the heart of what, the kind of meme, or not the meme, but the thing that people say about JPEGs. Oh, it's just about NFTs rather. Oh, it's just a JPEG. I can download it myself. So yeah, on the one hand, it's free, but then that particular jibe about NFTs also kind of shows the other side to it, which is that we're talking about things which are, in the case of a high value NFT, is free to look at, but one person owns it. And maybe that's something that I find slightly troubling. I suppose definitely the kind of the value of certain high value NFTs, or just the NFT market in general, is something that's slightly troubling. In a system designed to evade trust, the untrustworthy flourish. Don't trust, verify. If you can't understand how the code works, you'll be taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just reading out the messages here just so I can catch up with them. Um, and Lucas. Oh no, it's a comment.
Yes.
Oh, it's actually sorry.
Okay.
It's someone
Cool.
new. It's someone with cloud emojis. Hello. I'm going to call you cloud emoji unless you want to give me a different name to call you by. This is ironic because it assumes obsolescence. This is a comment on Lucas's.
He,
Hi there.
they ain't in the chat.
Say that again. They're not in the
So
chat. Oh, okay,
they
fair enough.
ain't in voice chat. Yeah.
Okay. So it says this is ironic. So it assumes obsolescence. What happens when you buy into a system that's made obsolete by a better database? What happens when ETH becomes obsolete? That's an interesting question. Are you
Yes,
guys
that's actually.
familiar with
Sorry.
Are you familiar with David Rudnick's project, Exodus 2? I'll put it in
Not
the
sure.
chat. It's it's sort of maybe appropriate that this should come up at this juncture because this is a set of NFTs that I remember, or kind of at least, what am I talking about? Sorry, lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, so this set of NFTs, if you click on that link, you'll see that, well, maybe you won't see it immediately, but the idea is if you scroll about halfway down the page, is that these NFTs are scheduled for release at certain points in the future. And I think that, if I remember correctly, I think that the first 13 of them, or the first 11 have already been released. They were released over the course of a couple of weeks or a couple of months from maybe May or something, May or June onwards this year. But the period of time in between them gradually lengthens, until the final one is going to be released in about 39 years. 39 years, 272 days, whatever, 4 hours and 20 minutes and 12 seconds from now. And I guess one of the things that this project is about, in inverted commas, is probably that question that you just asked. Oh, I suppose Cloud Emoji is not going to be able to hear what I'm saying, but yeah, I guess this question of kind of what happens when ETH is obsolete. Yeah, will there still be Ethereum for one to buy these NFTs on in 40 years' time? Kind of an interesting idea. But yeah, without
I
without
think media.
commenting.
Have you heard of media archaeology? They will have a blast with this with this future past that will be.
Yeah, for sure,
I
for
mean,
sure. For real, this is yeah, it's an interesting project. I mean, I'm just trying to see what these sold
You should
for.
treat any voice chat recording really as something that 300 years from now some digital archaeologists will listen to.
Yeah, quite. Well, yeah, exactly. There are so many questions surrounding that on there. Maybe it'll just be, maybe some artificial intelligence in centuries' time will be just scanning this and transcribing it, and who knows. But I'm just yeah. I mean, going back to this question of kind of the sort of enormous price tag on some of these NFTs. I mean, I'm looking at this Exodus 2. I'm looking at number 3 of that, and that is being sold for 500 ETH, which is $2 million at the time of speaking. So yeah, there we go. I'll say that without comment. What else have we got here? Yeah, hopefully our cloud emoji friend can join in the chat. I can't remember where we got to. We were talking about Web3
I have another
and
question.
culture. Yeah, go for it.
Again, sorry if it is stupid. It's actually a question to you, Sri. When you think about this this new system, do you think that the transition to it will be sudden or gradual?
Who's this question for?
I think
Anyone who can answer.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, go for it.
Actually, anyone.
and I think that's really a question of elasticity, isn't it? Which doesn't make it any easier to answer, by the way.
How do you mean? What do you mean by elasticity?
Well, I mean, is it whether a transition is gradual or whether it is sudden? It's basically it's a question of over how much time do I have how much delta, as in change.
Right. Yeah.
And so think of a rubber band and snapping a rubber band
Mm.
versus gradually going from point A to point B. It's really, I'm just not really talking about elasticity. I was just using that as a proxy, really, for
Yeah.
talking about the various forms of or rather, it's hard to put right, the calculus involved, basically.
No, this is a really interesting concept actually. I suppose when you talk about elasticity and the sense of, I guess, maybe something that we consider to be a given substance or whatever being stretched and deformed. I guess there's also, you can pair that up with the concept of hysteresis, which
Yeah,
I've never
but
been terribly
also,
sure if I've been using that correctly, but I suppose the idea that
well,
once you reach a certain
I
form of
actually
deformation, there's no going back.
I
So I
actually
suppose
have
that's the thing, like there
there's
becomes the
one,
moment where there's no going back after you've stretched the thing.
yeah, there's one graphic that is, I think, very helpful in a way to think about this, which is it's a minor correction to a common graphic. Like everything is that's ripped from the Wikipedia article on accuracy,
Mm,
and the only thing that I've changed is I've struck out probability, because mathematically speaking, that's an overly restrictive way of talking about it. Whereas you can
right.
just talk about frequency directly instead of limiting yourself to probability. It
Gotcha.
doesn't change any of the variables.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you can think about this in terms of time resolution, right?
Mm,
Like if we assume the harshest transition possible, like on day X, you have a jump from 1 second to the other second, and suddenly everything massively changes, right?
mm, yeah.
Then you have
Yeah.
very, 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 very accurate time precision. But if you have a gradual transition, you have a much wider range of areas that you're talking about, where you could say, well, the transition happened there, and then it's like trying to nail down what is a millennial, for example,
Yeah.
or what is Gen X.
Yeah.
It doesn't really quite work, but
Yeah.
kind of works.
Yeah, for sure. It would be really I'd love to I've just noticed the time actually. I'm gonna have to probably um go soonish. So
Yes,
I
same.
don't know if we'll be able to sort of spend that much more time talking about it on the voice chat anyway. But I'd love to. I'd really like to hear more about this because this is a really interesting, a really interesting idea, useful kind of conceptual tool, I think. But yeah, could you carry on telling us about it in the voice chat, maybe after the call's over?
I can try. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
it'd be useful. It'd be really useful.
Yeah,
We don't have to
but
finish literally the
as
second, but just I'd forgotten that we
yeah,
started 10
no, I'm
minutes
just
late.
saying, like,
You know.
this is a really difficult question to answer, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Like when does an era end? When does another one begin? What is it
yeah,
that makes that happen?
and in turn, answering that question about whether we're going to see gradual transitions or not, um, it's really difficult to answer, because you could try to do things like factor in, like, there's various prediction markets
Mm,
which try to nail various dates in history down.
Yeah.
But the problem with prediction markets, it's not about getting the prediction right.
Yeah.
That's it's never been about that. It's about getting the question right.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
Definitely.
And
Absolutely.
so it's a really hard to answer question.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know. This is a sort of completely idle comparison, just because I found myself thinking back to what we were talking about at the beginning, in terms of the peculiar nature of 2666, in terms of its sense of being kind of complete and incomplete at once. I mean, I don't know how familiar everybody is with 2666, apart from Elle, who has it very freshly in her mind right now. But it does have this strange sense of the parallel I'm thinking about between kind of, when is the moment when things change? What are the things that contribute to that? How are they all linked up? When do they suddenly kind of spring up from being unknown or unknowable to being something that's definitively there? There is a strange sense that you have of that with 2666. It's so heterogeneous in the sense that all of the different bits seem to have nothing to do with each other, and yet they do somehow inhere and create this complete object, I suppose, at the end, despite their kind of sort of inherent sense of incompleteness. I don't know if this if this parallel, this analogy is actually going to make a tremendous amount of sense, but I guess maybe the even better analog or analogy to make is actually that Blake Butler review that I was reading out about what creations are, about how there's something that, what does he say again? There's something that can be aimed at, desired, built, and would represent singular space that would otherwise go unrecognized. And then once they're there, they're beyond control. And there's similarly that's the sort of sense of the hinge point that I have of kind of where change happens. Someone builds something that was not there before, and then suddenly it becomes a coordinate or a kind of point which cannot be rowed back from. And I think I feel that we're seeing so much of that already in, I guess, what we call Web 2.5. I don't know if I talked about that before, but people like to talk about things like Discord and Substack as being Web 2.5, in that they have emerged out of Web 2.0, but in a sense, that's where Web 3 is being created, at least as a kind of cultural entity, let's say, as well as in more, concrete sense of like the actual technology that's being built. You might have heard these terms. I was talking about the dark forest before. The dark forest is essentially the whole world of Discord servers on which people are discussing all this kind of stuff that's not indexed on public search engines. You can't Google something and find a chat that someone's talking about in whatever Discord server. Compared to the ClearNet. The ClearNet is the public net in a sense. And I guess the dark forest is where
technically the term ClearNet specifically is a very technical term that refers to basically any unencrypted transmission on the public internet.
I wasn't aware that it had a kind of more specific definition.
Yeah, it comes out of intelligence work.
Right. Yeah.
But I think there is another term for what you're talking about, but I can't really quite. I'm having tip of the tongue problem there.
Yeah. Well, if you remember it, do put it in there, because when I use ClearNet, I tend to use it in possibly a slightly inaccurate sense, just kind of generalizing, really just to have something to say to illustrate the distinction between the dark forest and whatever everything else is, But yeah, do drop it in there if you remember it. It's been an absolute pleasure, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and sorry I have to run now. I was hoping we would have a bit more time to kind of wind things up less abruptly, but I've enjoyed this hugely. We'll do this again very soon. So take care.